Alright, this video is going to go over again how to solve quadratics using the 6 following methods. 1, GCF, you're looking for a common factor. Number 2, difference of two squares, which was dots for short. Number 3, factoring a trinomial by the A times C method. Number 4, completing the square. Number 5, using the quadratic formula. And number 6, isolating the factor, which is square roots. After viewing the video, you must complete the practice problems and the additional assessment. If you have any questions, see me as soon as you can. Alright, let's get started. Let's look at number 1. Alright, we're going to do GCF. So I'm looking for the largest thing that both of these have in common, which in this case is my 4x. So we're going to factor that out, which leaves us with 4x times x minus 1. We're going to use the zero product property and set each x equal to 0. So 4x equal to 0 and x minus 1 equal to 0. And now we're going to solve for x. So my two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals positive 1. Alright, let's look at another example. Solve x squared plus 3x equal to 0. Notice that both of the terms have an x in common, so we're going to factor that out first. So we have x times x plus 3 equals 0. Here again, we're going to use the zero product property. We set each x equal to 0. So we're going to have x equals 0, and then x plus 3 equals 0. Solve for x, so our two solutions are 0 and negative 3. Alright, type 2. Let's look at dots, difference of two squares. So in a problem like this, we have to have a difference, and both of the terms have to be perfect squares. So when you recognize this, it's going to be the following pattern. We're going to take the square root of the first term and the square root of the second term, and they're going to be conjugates. So that means we're going to have 3x plus 7 times 3x minus 7 equals to 0. Use the zero product property and set each factor equal to 0. So we're going to have 3x plus 7 equal to 0 and 3x minus 7 equal to 0. Solve each for x. So we're going to have 3x equals negative 7. X is equal to negative 7/3. For our second problem, we're going to have 3x minus 7 equals 0. Move the 7, so 3x equals 7. Divide by 3, x equals 7/3. So my two solutions are negative 7/3 and positive 7/3. Alright, another dots problem. Now be careful, GCFs can be anywhere, so always look out for a GCF, a greatest common factor. So let's find the zeros. Alright, so I have two terms here. It's squared, but I notice I've got a plus, and I've got an 8 and 32 aren't perfect squares. But I got a GCF. My GCF is negative 8. So I can factor out a negative 8 first. And when I do that, I get x squared minus 16. That's dots. So let's factor the x squared minus 16. So I'm going to end up with, now because I have a GCF and I'm solving an equation, I can divide by x. So I'm going to end up with, divide by 8. I'm going to end up with x squared minus 16 equal to 0. I'm only allowed to do this when I have an equation. So now let's factor x squared minus 16. It factors to x plus 4 and x minus 4 equals 0. Set each factor equal to 0. So I get x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 4 equal to 0. Solve each for x. So I've got x equals negative 4 and x equals positive 4. So always look out for a GCF. And here again, because I'm solving an equation, I can divide by negative 8 and get rid of that GCF. Alright, let's look at factoring trinomials. So you're looking for three terms. I'm going to factor this by a times c. Here again, always look for a GCF first. 2, 5, and 2 don't have a GCF. So now I'm going to go to my a times c method. Make sure this is also in standard form. And everything's on one side. Alright, so a times c gives me 4. So I want to know what multiplies to give me 4, but adds to give me my b value, which is 5. So my two factors are 4 and 1. Alright, so I'm going to rewrite my trinomial, but instead of 5x, I'm going to rewrite this with 4x and 1x. So here's my second step. So I've got 2x squared plus 4x plus 1x plus 2. Alright, group the first two terms and group the second two terms. Now it turns into factoring by grouping. Alright, if I'm going to factor out my GCF for 2x plus 4x, which is 2x. So I'm left with 2x times x plus 2. For 1x and 2, my GCF is 1. You have to factor out something. So if they don't have anything in common, factor out a 1. So I end up with 1 times x plus 2 equals 0. At this point, I have to have my two terms alike. So I'm looking to see, making sure these two are exactly the same. Alright, let's write the factors. So the outsides come together to make one factor. So that's 2x plus 1, and then my repeats make the second factor. So there it is factored. Now to solve it, I want to use the zero product property and set each factor equal to 0. So I've got 2x plus 1 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. Solve both for x. So my answer is x is equal to negative 1/2 and x is equal to negative 2. Alright, let's look at another one. Now remember, if the lead coefficient is negative, we're going to factor it out. And because this is an equation, I can divide every term up here by negative 1. So my new equation is going to become 6x squared minus 7x minus 3 equals 0. Alright, since it's three terms, I need to recognize it's going to be A times C method. So I'm going to multiply 6 times negative 3 and get negative 18. So it multiplies to give me negative 18 and has a difference of negative 7. Alright, hopefully you said negative 9 and 2. Alright, let's rewrite using those new numbers that we just came up with. So I'm going to rewrite my equation to 6x squared minus 9x plus 2x minus 3 equal to 0. Next I'm going to group. So I'm going to group my first two terms together and my second two terms together. I'm going to factor out the GCF for both. For my first one it's 3x, leaving me with 2x minus 3. And for the second one it's 1, leaving me with 2x minus 3. Write your factors so the outsides come together and make a factor, and then my repeats make the second factor. Set both factors equal to 0. 3x plus 1 equals 0, and 2x minus 3 equals 0, and then solve for x. So x equals negative 1/3, and x is equal to positive 3/2. Alright, now let's look at completing the square. Completing the square is a very important property to know if you plan on going to pre-calc next year. Alright, so step number 1, we're going to isolate the x terms. So that means I'm going to add 13 to both sides. Alright, now I need to find c. To find c, c is half of b squared. So that means in this case, half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9. Now you must remember to add 9 to both sides. Otherwise this won't work. You have to keep the equations balanced. Now the whole reason that we completed the square is to make a perfect square trinomial. So we're going to factor x squared plus 3x plus 9, which factors to x plus 3 squared. And 13 plus 9 is 22. Take the square root of both sides. So x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus square root of 22. Don't forget your plus or minus. We've got two solutions here. And now we're going to solve for x. That means we're going to subtract 3. So our final answer is x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 22. Alright, now let's complete the square when our lead coefficient is not 1. So look at the note. If a is not equal to 1, then you must factor it out before finding c. All right, so we still start off by isolating the x terms. So we're going to subtract 5. But before I can find c in my second step, I need to factor that 4. Factor out that 4. So I'm going to factor out the 4, and I get x squared minus 2x. All right, now I'm going to use that negative 2 to find my c. So c is half of negative 2, which is 1 squared, which is positive 1. But I can't find my c until I've factored out that 4. Now, here's where you have to be really careful. We're going to keep this equation balanced. So it's equal to negative 5 plus 4. You've got to remember to multiply the 5 times the 1, the 4 times the 1, and that's what gets added to both sides. We've got to keep this equation balanced. All right, let's factor it. Keep the 4. Let's factor x squared minus 2x plus 1 factors to x minus 1 squared is equal to negative 1. Now in this case, before I can take the square root of both sides, I need to isolate that x minus 1 squared. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. So I know with x minus 1 squared equals to negative 1/4. Now we square root both sides. So x is equal to negative 1. X minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1 over the square root of 4. All right, move my x, and I'm going to simplify my radicals. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides, so x equals to 1 plus or minus. The square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 4 is 2. So my final answer is x equals 1 plus or minus 1/2 I. All right, let's look at using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. All right, the first thing we have to do is put this in standard form. So that means I need to subtract 3x and add 5. Then I can find my a, b, and c. So my a is 1, my b is negative 3, and my c is 5. Now we're going to simply plug into the equation. All right, so here's what I've got when I plug in all my values for the equation. Now we're going to simplify. So the opposite of a negative 3 is a positive 3, plus or minus 9 minus 20 over 2. And I'm just going to continue to simplify. So 9 minus 20 is negative 11. Well, a negative underneath the radical means I need to pull out an I. So my final answer is 3 plus or minus the square root of 11 I over 2. Make sure that I is outside of the radical. If you want, you can put it in front of the radical. All right, last example. Let's isolate the factors. Take the square root. So that means I need to isolate that factor. I have to move everything away from my x minus 3 squared. So first we're going to add 3 to both sides. So we end up with 4 times the quantity x minus 3 squared equals 12. Now before I take the square root, I've got to divide by 4. So divide both sides by 4. I get x minus 3 squared equals 3. Square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. So x minus 3 is equal to plus or minus square root of 3. And now simply add the 3. So my final answer is x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 3. All right. Now remember, all of these answers can be checked by using the polynomial tool on your calculator. As long as the equation's in standard form, let's go back and look at one. Let's look at this one. All right, I can check this using the polynomial tool on my calculator. So let's pull that up. All right, so hit the home screen. I want a calculator. I want to go to Menu, Algebra, Polynomial Tool, Complex Roots of a Polynomial Tool. So Menu 333. Type in the equation, 4x squared minus 8x plus 5 And you tell the calculator, you go to comma x. You want to solve this equation for x. All right, hit enter, and there are your two solutions. So the polynomial tool will work on any time if it's in standard form. The only one that won't work for in our examples here is that last example, because with parentheses it's not in standard form. So you could put the equation in standard form and then check your answer. Okay, I hope that helps. Make sure that you complete the worksheet that's posted on Vision. Come see me if you have questions. And you need to take that new assessment by Friday, January 11th. Good luck, and look forward to seeing you soon.